Hello YouTube, my name is Isabella and today I thought I would change it up a little bit and actually go back and react to my first ever favorites video that I ever posted. I have been creating content on and off for, has it been 4 years? Which is a scary thought. I'm not necessarily sure how I got onto this thought process, but a few weeks ago I was just kind of struck thinking how different of a person I am from 4 years ago, and I'm like morbidly curious to go back and see what I thought were my favorites, and I figured making a video out of it would be just fairly interesting. From the ages of 20 to now, me being 24, which, side note, sometimes makes me want to vomit when I realize that I'm 24. I don't know, I just think I'm a vastly different person. I think I'm a way more intelligent, empathetic, well-rounded individual, which I think is always the goal. You always want to be growing and changing. The way I think of things in general in life is so different and vast, and the way I review books, the way I think of books is so different as well. I loved fantasy then, I love fantasy now, but I know back when I first started BookTube, I was reading pretty much almost exclusively YA, and that has definitely flopped. I read significantly more adult works now, which I think just makes sense because, again, I'm 24. I just want to know what I valued in books 4 years ago, because I know it's not the same, because I can't really think of what my favorites would have been back then. So we're going to react. This is my first time actually attempting to do a sort of reaction video, so editing this is going to be really fun. Probably going to have to address my horrific makeup skills, the lack of being able to string together a sentence without weird pauses throughout, and we're just going to have to see. I'm honestly really scared. Something that is annoying is my phone won't screen record for the amount of time that I need to react to it. So I'm gonna have to react with my laptop and a program that I don't entirely know how to use, but I think I've made it work for what I need. The screen throws me off like no other. I feel like I'm tripping when doing it, but we're gonna start. Okay, the very first thing I see before even launching this is that I've got blue sprayed edges with this right here, and that means Strange the Dreamer. This is the 2017 would have been the year I read Strange the Dreamer, and I know that was my favorite read of the year that I still identify with, and that we will talk about more. I'm also struck by the time on here. It makes sense that the video is longer, but back in the day, the one thing I was good at and better at than what I do now is posting short videos. Short content does not exist on my channel at this current point in time. I'm nervous. I already see that my eyebrows don't look so bad from far away, but I know up and close is going to be rough. Oh shit, I don't want to deal with this. Hello YouTube, my name is Isabella from the channel Stubborn. Today I'm going to be finally discussing my favorite books of the year. Okay, just watching the intro, or like the very beginning, I'm already scared. Eyebrows are horrific. I knew that was going to happen, but yeah, I knew that was going to be a thing. I ironically still own that cardigan. And even looking at my shelves, what I have on here is very interesting, because at the point in time I had not yet read the Kiss of Deception series, so it's weird that I had that there. Holy shit, just noticed. All my Harry Potter stuff was still up there, which it has now been replaced, because this is not the point of this video, but Harry Potter will have a place in my heart for the rest of my life, but it is something that brings me more sadness than happiness. So last year I decided to fully get rid of them off of my shelves. They're currently in a closet tucked away because they make me sad. I see Strange the Dreamer, of course, Six of Crows, which I still love and identify with. The Cinder series I like but do not identify with. I see a lot of Schwab on there. This is interesting, and it is definitely a reflection of who I was as a reader. 9 of those books I gave 5 stars. I also gave 5 stars to a couple of rereads that I did, but I'm not counting that. So I'm going to shout out the 2 books quickly first. The first one is Lord of Shadows by... Okay, so not a 5 star, but a shout out. And wow, do I not identify with that anymore? Let's hear what I have to say first.
Cassandra Clare. This is the sequel to Lady Midnight. I love nearly every character in this series other than our two main ones, and that's kind of the reason why this book doesn't get the full 5 stars. However, I really liked the development of the world, and I like how this series, the Dark Artifices series, seems to be a little bit more mature. She's tackling some difficult subjects, and I like how she is developing these stories further.
I still read Cassandra Clare to this day, which is a little funny because I don't really think of her at all in terms of who I am as a reader or like reader identity. I read them as like fun, turn your brain off, and also somewhat nostalgia related stuff. I absolutely do not think of any of them as favorites other than like the original series in terms of like nostalgic purposes. That I do not identify with at all. So maybe I'll put a little tally, but do not identify or do not think it reflects me. Strike one. Next book, which is still, I think, a shout out.
Another book I really quickly want to shout out is Wonder Woman by Leigh Bardugo. This book was a total surprise to me. I went into it with rather low expectations.
Why didn't I put it at
and
cover?
Was blown away. Above all, I loved the emphasis on female friendships. I highly recommend it, even if you don't love the superhero books, comics, movies, whatever. It's a really good story.
I remember being really taken by Wonder Woman when I read it, for the exact reasons that I stated. I liked the female friendships. I thought it was a fun romp. I think I ended up giving it 4.5 out of 5 stars. I think if I read it to this day, I would still enjoy it, but rate it vastly differently, because with something just being a fun romp, like in like fantasy or that kind of stuff, I need a little bit more to give it a higher rating.
All right, now actually on to the list. I have ranked them in order. I'm gonna go from 9 to 1. Number 1 is gonna be my favorite, and I'm really excited to share the books.
I have no fucking idea what, like, especially the bottom tier of these are going to be, because I know Strange the Dreamer's number 1, but I have no idea what else is on this list. This is really weird.
My list. So the first book I'm going to share with you, and the 9th book overall on this list, is Our Dark Duet by Victoria Schwab. It's bleak, and it pulls no punches, and it's sometimes really, really hard to stomach. But those are sorts of stories that I really love. Characters go through so much pain and suffering, but there's also always those little glimmers.
All right, I think I'm done listening to myself talk about Our Dark Duet. I have had a very interesting relationship with reading V.E. Schwab books, because at the beginning of BookTube, which we see right here, I really loved a lot of her stuff, but a lot of her more recent stuff I haven't really identified with, and Our Dark Duet, I guess I gave it 5 stars. I don't think if I read it now I would give it 5 stars again, and I don't think this book is reflective of who I am as a reader currently. So strike 2, strike 3. We're 3 for 3 for books that I do not think reflect me any longer.
My 8th favorite book this year was Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia. Eliza is a regular old teenage girl who goes...
Okay, let me finish. But past me finish what I was going to say, and then I'll react to it, because the fuck?
I devoured this book. Above all else, was truly a love letter to fandom and fandom culture, and it sets itself apart from just regular contemporaries and even other contemporaries that have attempted to do this. Zappia really, 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 really knows what it's like to be a part of fandoms.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt my past self here, because what the fuck am I talking about? I don't really participate in fandom. I never really have. The closest was, of course, Harry Potter, but I was never on message boards or reading fan fiction. I just, as a child, loved something deeply and personally, and it was to myself. I don't know what the fuck I was talking about, but I guess apparently I really was attached to the idea of fandom being discussed. I do remember liking the mental health representation in here, and like that being discussed, and I think maybe that is why I attached to it so much, because mental health was not something I guess I had read a lot about in the past. This is really, really strange to me. I do not think about this book at all. I do still own it. I guess I gave it 5 stars. And again, put it on the tally. Do not think that this book reflects me at all. Liked messy women, because that's something I still love to this day. Messy characters, messy friendships. Not so much messy relationships, but I can appreciate when something is imperfect. But I do not, again, identify with this at all. Strike number 4 against it. We're going to move on.
It was so very relatable to me, and it was The Upside of Unrequited by Becky Albertalli. This book follows 16...
I don't need to recap what it's about, but Upside, again, haven't really thought about that one in a long time.
It was so relatable to me, and I just haven't really found that in a book previously for some of the things that I have gone through in my teen years and still kind of struggle with today.
Interesting.
And I loved it for that. Both anxiety and being fat are
okay. I was just about to critique my past self to say that being fat was something you were scared of. This is honestly really, really funny because I am significantly thinner back then, and I was working through some feelings, but a lot more confident now and not afraid of the word fat and all that stuff.
It comes through on the page, and the thoughts that Molly had are scarily similar to some of the thoughts and feelings I had when I was her age, and I just think that this book can do a lot of good.
I think this is a book that is very reflective of books that I would have wanted as a teen. I appreciate when there's representation that I can relate to when I'm reading, like, say, a coming of age story, but it's not something I require or need. But when you do see it, especially something like with Fat Rep, that stuff really wasn't a thing so much in YA back in the day. I can see how younger me would have really attached to that, and that was the first time, at least, that I can remember being seen. And it's interesting to think as well, though, this is another book that I don't think about at all, and overall probably don't think is reflective of who I am currently as a reader. I was thinking about possibly making a 3rd tier and like a middle of the road thing, and I understand why younger me was struck with this story, why I was taken with this book, but it's not reflective of who I am as a reader. Now, I still enjoy, in my heart, Becky Albertalli's stories, but I haven't read one of her things since, I think, Leah on the Offbeat, so I'd be interested to read some now and see how I feel about them. I'm gonna be honest. I find my speaking voice, kind of annoying, but 20-year-old me, I find it even more annoying. I don't know if that's audio quality or the way I deliver things, but it's a little grating. We're going to move on to the next book, though.
An unpopular one, and it is A Gathering of Shadows by
Unpopular?
E. Schwab. Ooh. Now, I say unpopular because a lot of people don't like this one in the trilogy. They think it's boring and slow and nothing happens, but it's weirdly kind of why I loved it.
Initial thoughts? Wow, forgot that was the year that I finished out that trilogy, and again, me identifying with V.E. Schwab. I'll be honest, I read these books so early on into being on BookTube that I don't know how I feel about them at all to this day, and I think they are ones that I need to reread. It's interesting because they are adult fantasy and probably one of my very first forays into it, but their characters, the ages aren't so different or unrelatable. They actually probably were around my age when I was reading those books. I guess I should listen to the rest of what I'm saying before I go and undercut my old self.
And introduced 2 new perspectives from Alucard and Rye. I love the budding romances between both parties, and it was very much character based before the insanity that is the 3rd book. I just love V.E. Schwab's writing. She has 2 books on this list. Her characters are fantastic, and I love the uniqueness of this story.
I find it very funny that younger me would have said I am not a romance reader in the slightest, but I have talked about the romances in almost all of these books. That is some internalized misogyny, young friend. I don't know if I would identify and love the characters in the Shades of Magic series as much as I did back then. I think I'll get very irritated by Miss Delilah Bard as opposed to love her. I do have to reread that series in the future to see if I love it. I do still like Victoria Schwab's writing. Her prose is pretty great, but the way she writes her stories, I don't think I identify with as much anymore, and therefore do not identify with it as a current favorite. Next book
on here was a last minute entry, and it was The Language of Thorns by Leigh Bardugo. Holy shit, is this book great. This book is essentially, they were dark and atmospheric, and they really subverted tropes in a very clever way. And it made me fall in love again with fairy tales and dark, creepy sorts of things. I really read like fables as well. Like they had lessons that Grisha children would grow up learning, and I just love them to pieces.
The Language of Thorns is one that has sat well, decently well, in my feelings. Would I consider it a favorite of all time or something that really reflects me as a reader? Not quite, but it's not one that I think is a bad recommendation or like something that I want disassociated from myself. I think this is going to go into the maybe category, or a book I like, a book I am okay with, but it's not something that resonated deeply within myself. I find it very funny, the authors that I'm talking about, because they are all incredibly popular authors and were incredibly popular in 2017. I haven't had really any surprises on here. Also, I think every single book that I have mentioned on here has been written by a white woman, and there are some queer authors on here which I appreciate, but yeah, not very diverse in my terms of reading back then. But we're going to move on. I do like The Language of Thorns. I'd be interested in rereading that one because I remember being really struck by certain things. And I love fairy tale mythology, all that kind of stuff. But we are going to move on to the next book.
To me was The Rest of Us Just Live Here by Patrick. It is a story about the humans, superheroes. In and of itself was hilarious, and it really made fun of the chosen one trope, which is a trope I really love, but it was hilarious to read. This story has a diverse cast of characters, and our main character, Mikey, is suffering from severe OCD, which I believe his own voice is representation. It's such a relatable story because they're just trying to figure out what they want to do with their lives, and whilst coping with the fact that the world is falling to shit, like maybe every few years.
Interesting. Okay. This one was a shock to me because, again, I never think about this book. Sorry. But listening to former me talk about why she loved this book, I can see why. I understand. It's quirky. It is unique. It is technically set in a fantasy world, but a contemporary story between the humans. And that stuff, now talking about it, makes me think highly of it. But I have not thought about this book in years. I honestly don't know where it is on my shelves. I think for the reasons I'm giving it, I'm okay with it being a book that I like and a book that is something I used to love, but it is absolutely not a favorite book of all time or one that has stood the test of time because I forgot it existed. I forgot. Okay, I'm a little nervous to see what past me said about this book because as I've grown as a person, I have learned and grown so much more, and even in my social understanding, this is going to be interesting to say the least. And our first author of color is on this list. I'm not particularly a huge fan of past me having this on this list and currently being the only author of color when it's a story about race and identity and police brutality. I'm falling into the white girl trope of having a book on here because it's just so tragic and not loving that.
This book is incredible, and I cannot believe that it is a debut. Each scene was incredibly crafted with care, and you could go from cheering and laughing to crying within scenes. Angie Thomas is a fantastic storyteller. I cannot recommend this book enough. This book is going to do and has already done so much good for the world. On a personal note, it did help check my privilege and really put some things into perspective that I did not know and was ignorant of. And now that's not the purpose of this book. Angie Thomas very clearly says that this book is written for Black teens. Fantastic book. Fantastic book. It's already essentially a modern classic and it deserves everything it gets.
Okay. All right, younger me. I'm 50-50 with your thing. I like the fact that I acknowledge privilege and that it did teach me things, but that is not the purpose of the story. I am happy about that. I think it's fine to read books outside of your experience and to gain something for it, but you have to realize that that is not necessarily the intention of those books unless you're reading nonfiction. This one does stand the test of time. It is one that I still consider a favorite. I would love to go back to it.
My second favorite book, my runner-up favorite book of this year was again...
Wait, no, my audio's not working anymore. I think my headphones just died. Shit! I think I fixed it. And if I didn't, I'm sad about it. I hope things don't go wrong, but I think we're on book number 2.
Total surprise to me, and it is 1,000 Splendid Suns by Khaled.
Oh shit!
This book is kind of a multi-generational novel. The story between two women who've gone through so much shit. They've gone through literally some of the worst things that human beings can go through, yet they persevere, and their love for one another really just knocked me off of my feet. I cannot explain how much I loved and was invested between the relationship between these two women. And although this story was sometimes really horrible to read, I would put a trigger warning on domestic violence and sexual assault. Khaled Hosseini is from Afghanistan, and you can tell that he loves his country. It's had a really hard time, and you can tell that he loves it and he just wants it to be better. And I just...
Ugh. 1,000 Splendid Suns is a book I love, is a book that I think has absolutely stood the test of time and one that I still think of to this day. I don't love that I said, oh, he just wants his country to be better. Babe, there's a lot of factors going on in there, and it is not the people of Afghanistan's fault. Was quite out of my wheelhouse at the time, it being like kind of popular adult lit ficky stuff. Yes, I am proud to have that on my list. I think it is something that is different for me as a reader, but it is reflective of what I value in storytelling.
My number one favorite book should come as a shock to literally no one.
Yep.
But, yep, it's my favorite, and it is Strange the Dreamer.
Oh, it's so pretty.
I don't think I have the capacity, the words to describe how much I love this story and how beautiful I think it is. Laini Taylor is a master at her craft. She is so far above what we deserve. She is amazing, amazing writer. I'm not going to tell you what this book really is about. When people give the synopsis, it makes me go, no, you're giving too much away. When I started planning for my spoiler-filled discussion, which I'm not done planning for, because there's a lot to discuss, I started thinking of the few littlest bits that I think I would have preferred or liked changed slightly, and then I started to doubt myself whether or not I truly love this book. But this book isn't perfect, and there is a thing or two that I would have liked to be slightly different.
That's very interesting. I would love to know what
it doesn't
I wanted
mar
change.
The fact that I loved it. I love this book so very much.
Girl, you ain't saying why you love it. You're just saying you love it.
It was so original, and I've read nothing like it.
Original. Yes. Hold on. I'm going to stop the recording so this isn't longer, but we're going to talk about Strange the Dreamer, because I'll be damned if I don't talk about Strange the Dreamer. Strange the Dreamer. I love this book. It is absolutely still reflective of who I am as a reader and what I value in storytelling. If you can see, I don't remember how exactly much you can see of this shelf here, but this is my shrine to Laini Taylor. I think really soon I'll be getting a new version from like LitJoy Crate or whatever. Ooh, they're a wee bit dusty. Love this book. I think this one is the Illumicrate editions that they did back then. I am obsessed with this book and series and Laini Taylor as an author still to this day. It kills me that she hasn't published anything else since Strange and Muse. Like, it kills me. But Laini Taylor's writing is phenomenal. I love the way she pieces together her stories. I love the way she crafts her world. It is so unique. It's honestly a shame that I read these so early on into my booktube career, because I don't really find the opportunity to talk about them as often as I would like. I love this series. I love Laszlo Strange. I find it very funny that I mentioned that I love the romance, because I do love it, but there are problems with it, and the fact that the way it ramps up so fast is a little ridiculous. But this book brings me so much joy. It is definitely in like some of my top 5 favorite books of all time still. I remember the magic of opening the story for the first time, and I remember being scared of it because of the way it's written. The first 50 pages, I was like, oh my god, this is rough, because I didn't know what was going on, and the world building was so like expansive. This has been really interesting to go back and see what younger me, past me, thought. I think this video has also just brought me some joy, because I still love reading and I still love making videos, even though sometimes I question why I still do this. I love the fact that I have changed, and that a lot of these books I don't necessarily identify with, because it just speaks to the fact that I have changed, grown, and evolved, and the things I value in stories are very different, and I have absolutely narrowed down my tastes and discovered what I like more and more as I've gone throughout my reading life. Also, I just realized some of my Victoria Schwab books haven't actually moved. I still got them right over here, and they are in the exact same spot that they used to be back in that iteration of my shelves, but I haven't currently moved them because I think of these books as favorites, and like these are the top 2 all-time favorite series right here that I want people to see front and center. And when I find other things that I want right beside it, I'll replace these. But right now I'm okay with covering them with my Blue Jays pride flag and my 500 bookmarks. I guess let me know down in the comments below a book you used to consider your favorite but maybe not so much anymore, and the reasoning behind that if you are so inclined. But as always, thank you so much for sticking this video out. I feel like it's going to be the longest thing I've ever done. But as always, I super appreciate it, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye!